Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. We're having a bit of a spring clean and change around in the workshop this week, and we're going to be doing some upgrades for my Evolution table saw. Roll the intro. Now fellow woodworkers, this is my Rage 5S table saw, which you will have seen in dozens and dozens of my builds, and it is a fantastic table saw for an entry-level woodworker like me. I don't think you can get a better table saw for the money, certainly not for the money that I paid for it because I bought it just before COVID, but there are a couple of limitations on this table saw, which the more and more things I'm doing and the more and more complex things I'm doing, the limitations are becoming more and more obvious. So this week I thought we'd have a little go at making a couple of upgrades. One to the actual fence, because although the fence is okay, it's not fantastic, and it's going to allow me to add a few things to it. The second upgrade is related to the first. I'm going to make a little feather board, a homemade feather board for the 5S, just because when I've been cutting wood recently, I've had my fingers closer to the blade than I'm really comfortable doing, and it did strike me that a feather board might be a really good idea. So I looked at a couple online, like this one from Temu and this one over here, but they were quite a lot of money. And the thing about using a homemade feather board is you can design it exactly around your table saw rather than having a sort of standard one and trying to convert it. So I'm going to make a feather board that runs in this track here so that I can keep work pushed up against it from this side, and I'm also going to make a sort of replacement fence which I can put in front of this fence, use it partially as a sacrifice fence, but I'm also going to attach a feather board on the top as well, so I've got sort of holding power from both sides. I've never done anything like this before. Let's see how it goes. So YouTube is full of videos of making your own featherboard, and I'm not going to reinvent the wheel or do something different to anybody else. What I'm going to do is use these scraps of wood because it's really the only wood I've got access to with the Garage Workshop in its current state. So I'm just going to use some of these offcuts of MDF, and I'm going to make a featherboard that fits in my T-track that I've already got. Now the Rage 5S miter saw comes with a miter slot, which is here, which I'll give you a close-up of, and that miter slot is obviously for the miter to move up and down. There's one positioned either side of the blade. One on the right hand side has a smaller clearance than the one on the left hand side, and obviously this table is expandable. You can open it and extend it. So the plan is to make one that is designed for the left hand side. So I'm going to cut a scrap of wood where the wood exactly matches the gap between the T-track and the blade. Once I've got that gap between the T-track and the blade, I'm going to use these T-track bolts. Now I bought these earlier in the year to make the fence for my router table. I'll put a link to that video in the description. Now these are far too long. I bought these from Temu actually. I'll try and find them and put a link in the description, but they're far too long. But for today's purposes, just to get the board made and to make sure it works, I'm going to use these, and then I can either cut them off or I can order some shorter bolts. So this T end of the bolt fits exactly inside my miter slot on my board. So I'm really going to go for a very simple design. I'm just going to cut a shape out, put a groove right down the middle of it, get it to the right size, and then just cut some 45-degree slots in the wood. And then as I want to use it closer to the blade or further away from the blade, I can slide the piece of wood closer or further away. It really is as simple as that. And then what I'm going to try and do, and I'm not guaranteed to do this, so don't hold your breath, I've got a couple of longer pieces of wood which will fit on the fence. So I'm thinking I might construct a fence that sort of just sits over, almost like a sleeve, and then I can attach a feather board to that. Now I'm thinking that I might do use the same, but then if I want to feed something that way and feed something that way, I'm going to have to make two, aren't I? So let's go. As you can see, this build is very much, I'm doing it as I go along, so it could be a complete disaster, but let's get cutting and see what we think. Oh, just one other thing. I am using MDF for this for a very specific reason. It's not just because it's the only thing that I can get access to. I've got plywood lying around everywhere from all the units I've disassembled. I am using this for a very specific reason. I think something like this, MDF, is really good. It doesn't bow like other woods do, certainly not plywood. It's really, really tough and it's really nice to cut with. The disadvantage is joining it together isn't too easy, but I'm just going to use a combination of wood glue, probably, and brad nails to do that. But first thing is, let's get the measurements for this right, and then let's cut this out and see where we go. So the first thing to do was to mark up, and I probably picked the most awkward way of doing that as possible, but it did work, so I got there in the end. Apologies, by the way, I've got a really heavy cold at the moment, so it may affect the voiceover, but when I've got an accurate measurement, a distance from the right hand side of the T-track slot to the blade, it gave me a measurement. I think it was 18.1 centimeters. It then let me go on to the second stage. Now here I'm just checking on this piece of MDF. This has got a factory edge on it. I just couldn't remember which side. I have cut this a few times, but I know that there was a factory edge on it. So when I found it, I just ticked it, and I use that as my sort of reference point from everything that I marked from then on. When I'd done that and I'd measured it exactly right, I just put a line across using the set square that I mentioned in my recent Temu haul video. I've actually used this a lot, and I can honestly say it's a fantastic measuring guide. I then ran it through the table, so I've got a little bit of an issue there. You can see with my riving knife is catching every time I make a cut. I think it's got a bash. Anyone got any ideas on how to cure that, let me know in the comments. I then took it over to my Evolution saw to cut it through. I'm going to mention this a bit later in the video, but it gave me a really, really lovely precise cut as usual. The next stage was then to adjust it. It's the first time I've done this on the Evolution saw. It's the first time I've used all the measuring adjustments on it to get it right. So it took a couple of minutes, but super easy to do. And then obviously I checked for the right angle and it was perfect. This was my first attempt. I've left it in because it was a huge cock up. When I cut it, I just did it by eye, which was ridiculous. I mean, look at that. Who makes that sort of mistake? Oh, I do. Anyway, this was my second attempt, which was a little bit better, but I just was not happy by then. So on to my third attempt, and I picked up this little tip. I think it was from Casual DIY, Thomas's channel, where basically he used like a guide to space out the blade. So I think I literally just stole that from him. So credit to Thomas if that's right. I've watched so many videos on YouTube on how to make a featherboard. I'm getting a bit confused as to whose bits I've borrowed or not. So I used one of the thinner ones just to sit in the groove, and then the red one you can see there is the thickness that I want it to be. It took an intergalactically long time to be able to peel the tape off, but when I got it in there, it was exactly the measurement that I was looking for. And as you'll see, it fitted in the groove nicely, so it enabled me to just space out. Now, I've left this footage in raw because I just want to show you how much dust was flicked up by using the table, using the miter saw. This is with the Evolution shop vac. I just could not get over how much there was. Okay, fellow woodworkers, so you would have just seen me do those cuts, and I've got my Evolution shop vac attached, which is empty. Just look at the dust. That shop vac is supposed to, stroke designed, to keep up with this table saw, but if you look at the amount of dust that's come out of that, that is very unimpressive. Absolutely everywhere, that dust. And I did forget to switch it on the first time, which is fair enough, but I don't think personally that vacuum, that shop vac, has got anywhere near the guts it needs to use with this table saw. It was just kicking off so much MDF, which is even more important when you're cutting MDF, that you wear the correct safety wear. So I have my mask, I have my glasses on and my ear defenders, but I really needed my mask because that has kicked up a lot of dust, so not very impressed with that. Hopefully you can see that's the finished board. Nice and neat, very straight cuts from the Evolution saw there. There's a little bits at the bottom, obviously, where the saw didn't go all the way down, but I didn't want to try and break that line at the bottom, so I left it as that. Yeah, there was one that was slightly bigger. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but it's a little bit thicker, and I just used that little spacer to try and get it after my first attempt where it all went a bit wrong. So the next thing I did was drill some holes. This was to help with the router, and I've definitely learned, because previously I would have just tried to hack out all of this MDF with the router on the maximum setting. So I did this in a number of passes, and this was literally just to help me. The routing went okay. It was a bit untidy, I'm not going to lie, but the process went okay. I'm definitely getting better with a router, but I also definitely need a lot more practice. And actually halfway through I had to engage the shop vac. When that was done, I just tidied up the little bits with a chisel. I didn't try and sort of correct any of the major issues. I literally just tidied up the end so that the bolt had a good path for sliding in. When that was done, it was just a case of popping it all together. I just dropped a washer in between and then had these little hand turners that came with the threads. I was pleased actually, because at this point I suddenly realised that this project had actually worked and it was a success, because I made my first cut with it and it absolutely held the wood completely in place. And I just took a moment to think, what did I set out to do at the beginning of this video? It was to make a feather board which I can now use all the time, which works really effectively. So I then decided I was being a little bit too hard on myself. Right, it doesn't look gorgeous, I get that, but at the end of the day functionality is more important than appearance. And I've now reconciled myself to the fact that I know it isn't great looking, but it does the job, and at the end of the day that's all it's there for. So I just set up a little block, just matched it up and just ran it through and gave it a little test to see how well it worked, and I was pleased to say it worked brilliantly. So fellow woodworkers, it's finished. I'm not going to lie, I feel a little bit conflicted by it. I set out to make a feather board that I can use with my table saw. Check, that's done. And I used all of the bits that I had lying around the workshop, so that was done, but I'm just not convinced it's very attractive looking. And the slots in particular, you might be able to see that. If not, I will give you a little bit of a close-up, are very untidy. One of them's sort of okay, but where the router slipped a little bit on one side, it's really messy. And I'm trying to do things on the channel where they're a little bit more quantity rather. Sorry, they're a little bit more quality, and I just don't think that fits into it. Now I have got a choice. I can cover the front of this to make the slots a bit easier, and I've got some of that white like plastic, so I might do that, but I could just draw the slots, redo the slots on the inside. But to be honest with you, I'm going to wait and think about that. I've achieved what I set out to achieve, which was to make a feather board. I thought about the fence and whether I was going to do that. To be honest, I want to have a little bit of a think about that before I do it. I think I've got some ideas in mind on what I want to do about that, so that will be a future video. So that's it, a shorter version of the Garage Workshop, I hope, by the time I've edited it. If this is your first time at the channel, thank you so much for watching. Please can I ask you to subscribe, like and comment. Don't forget my socials, there's a link to all of those in the description for this video. If you're a regular subscriber and viewer, thank you so much. Also, don't forget to like and comment. I've had some great feedback in the last few weeks. Really appreciate it. I hope you have a fantastic week, fellow woodworkers. I'll catch you on next week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Take care, everyone.